Breaking news. No! No more! I haven't even done the dishes yet. Fuck!
I'm sorry, positively Paige. It won't stop coming, and I have to tell the people. It's my duty. El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele said on Monday he won't bring back a man who was mistakenly deported from the U.S. while he was at the White House meeting with President Trump. During their meeting, Trump praised Bukele for letting his country's prisons take in gang members that Trump wants to deport and mentioned he'd send as many undocumented immigrants back to El Salvador as he could. Trump also noted that the U.S. would help build new prisons there. Side note, at the same time, the White House is talking about possibly sending Americans, homegrown as Trump calls us, there as well. But we will get into that in the next video. The Trump administration has deported hundreds of people, mostly Venezuelans, to El Salvador under the 1798 Alien Enemies Act, including a Maryland resident it has acknowledged deporting by mistake. Bukele said he did not have the power to return Salvadoran Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the United States.
The man who your administration says was mistakenly deported. The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
Well, let me ask Pam, would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
So will you return him?
And you are doing a great job.
Thank you.
Stephen Miller, wait a minute. Can you just also respond to that question? Because, you know, it's asked by CNN, and they always ask it with a slant because they're totally slanted because they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching them. But would you answer that question also, please?
Yes, gladly. So, as Pam mentioned, there's an illegal alien from El Salvador. So, with respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador. So, it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point. As two immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So he had a deportation order that was valid, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States and had to be returned because of the foreign terrorist designation. This issue was then, by a district court judge, completely inverted, and a district court judge tried to tell the administration that they had to kidnap a citizen of El Salvador and fly him back here. That issue was raised to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful, and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world, and I can promise you, if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan to
But
ask
the
for
Supreme
it
Court is
to get
asking
him back?
to...
And what was the ruling in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0
In our favor.
in our favor against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual, at El Salvador's sole discretion, was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
Well,
No version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
I asked
¿Usted lo
President
liberaría,
Bukele,
Presidente
what is
Bukele?
can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I suppose you're not suggesting that I smuggle terrorists into the United States, right?
It's always the
How can I smuggle? How can I return him to the United States? Like I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like I mean, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
But you can release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing, I mean, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. I mean, we just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? And that's not going to happen.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, released into
I mean, there's a fascination.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They're sick. These are sick people. Marco, do you have something to say about
Yeah, I mean, Stephen outlined it. I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people, back to their country of origin, except for Venezuela that wasn't refusing to take people back, or places like that. I can tell you this, Mr. President. No, the foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. It's that simple. End of story.
They don't want to bring back Kilmar Garcia, but the real reason is insane. They want to be able to deport anyone, citizens and non-citizens. Their whole thing is once you're out of the country, you're out of the jurisdiction of the courts. And then there's nothing they can do. So then, theoretically, anyone can be disappeared. Even if they make a mistake, you can't make me bring them back because they're not in our jurisdiction. It was Sonia Sotomayor, my favorite Supreme Court justice, who first pointed this out. She pointed out that the government's position is actually both citizens and non-citizens can be taken and deported, and once they're outside of the United States, then it is out of a judge's hands to be able to do anything about it. The Trump administration has made this argument over and over in court. It has never worked. One of the judges pointed out that we are paying El Salvador to take these people. Reuters found that we paid El Salvador $6 million to imprison 300 gang members. So if we have a problem with our service, perhaps we should try stopping payment. They don't want to bring him back because they want to be able to get rid of anybody they want.
Well, well, well. It appears we're going to have to restore some common sense to the conversation, honey. Yes, we don't want any more confusion going on, baby. Because some of you seem to be confused, and so does Daddy Dumpy Pants, too. You see, Daddy Dumpy Pants is having a little meeting up there in the White House with the president of El Salvador about returning that gentleman that was sent down there mistakenly. Yes, the one that wasn't supposed to be. Even the Supreme Court said so. But Daddy's lying to you on TV saying the Supreme Court did not tell him that, but it just so happens you can look it up, honey. It is on the SCOTUS website. He has been ordered to go down there and get that man and book him a flight expeditiously, honey, back to the U.S. of A. But either way, Daddy Dumpy Pants says that he doesn't have the power to go down there and get that man. Well, common sense would dictate that if you don't have the power to go get him, then you did not have the power to send him. Yes, silver bracelets, please. And apparently, according to the president of El Salvador, he doesn't have the power to return them. Baby, if you don't have the power to return them, then you were never actually given power to receive them. Silver bracelets, please. It's that simple. If he has all this power, then he has the power to go get them. If he had the power to send them, then he has the power to go get them. So it's just admitting in front of the whole world that you actually, Daddy Dumpy Pants, broke the law when you sent them down there. And you were breaking the law by not going and get them. Once again, silver bracelets, please.
The Trump administration has recently deported a bunch of people, mostly Venezuelans, back to El Salvador, including a Maryland resident they admitted they sent back by mistake. Bukele stated he can't do anything to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the U.S. Trump seemed pleased with this comment and took the chance to criticize his Democratic rivals over border issues, saying, "It's a sin what they did, and you are helping us out. We appreciate it." Just last week, the State Department eased travel warnings for Americans visiting El Salvador, crediting Bukele for cutting down on gang violence and crime. Over the weekend, the U.S. sent another 10 people they believe are gang members back to El Salvador. Secretary of State Marco Rubio called the cooperation between Trump and Bukele a good example for safety and growth in in the area. Family members and lawyers for the migrants in El Salvador argue that those deported aren't gang members and didn't get a chance to fight the U.S. government's claims. The Trump administration insists they checked to make sure the migrants were tied to gangs like Tren de Aragua and MS-13, which are seen as terrorist groups. Stephen Miller, Trump's deputy chief of staff, said before Bukele's visit that Abrego Garcia's deportation was valid, despite a court order stating otherwise. He noted that since Abrego Garcia was considered an illegal alien ordered to be deported, he could be held and sent to any country. Before the meeting, demonstrators, including Abrego Garcia's wife, who is a U.S. citizen, showed up outside the White House. One speaker urged Trump, "Bring Kilmar home now." I'm going to play what the El Salvador president said one more time for those in the back.
I asked
¿Usted lo liberaría, Presidente
Bukele? Can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed to not suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right?
It's always
how can I smuggle? How can I return him to the United States? Like I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
So you can release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing. We're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. We just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
To sum it up, is Mr. Garcia coming home? No. The fight will have to continue, but the fight is more important than you can imagine. It's Mr. Garcia today, but tomorrow it can be you, regardless of what your passport or ID states.